Hi everyone. Next, let's start chapter 7, developing the service communication strategy. This chapter is to provide an overview of communication strategy as it applies to the marketing of services. After studying this chapter, you should be able to discuss the steps necessary to manage the firm's service communication strategy effectively. Service practitioners that adhere to the following service communication process substantially increase their odds of obtaining their communication objectives. Number one, selecting target markets. After that, they establish communication objectives, and then they set the communication budget. After that, formulate the positioning strategy. Step 5 is to establish message and media strategies. Step 6 is to monitor, evaluate, and control the communication strategy. The second objective is to understand the special challenges associated with developing service communications. Special challenges associated with developing service communication mix include managing expectations, mistargeted communications, the use of communication to target employees as well as consumers, and the selling and operations conflicts that often arise when turning doers into sellers. The third objective of this chapter is to describe specific guidelines for developing service communications. Guidelines for development of service communications include develop a word-of-mouth communication network, promise what is possible, tangibilize the intangible, feature the working relationship between customer and provider, reduce consumer fears about variation in performance, determine and focus on relevant service quality dimensions, differentiate the service product via the service delivery process, make the service more easily understood. The fourth objective is to appreciate the special considerations faced by professional service providers and recommend solutions to overcome these challenges. These special considerations include third-party accountability, client uncertainty, the need for experience, limited differentiability, managing consumers in pursuit of maintaining quality control, turning doers into sellers, allocating the professional's time between marketing and operations, tendencies to be reactive rather than proactive. The effects of advertising are all known, and that most professionals have a limited marketing knowledge base. The special considerations for professional service providers include impressions are everything. Create visual pathways that reflect quality. Establish regular communications with clients. Develop a firm brochure, and an informed office staff is vital. The beginning story of this chapter is about TripAdvisor. Headquartered in Newton, Massachusetts, TripAdvisor was founded in 2000 and today employs 2,793 employees. The original purpose of this business was to provide travelers with up-to-date information and reviews about travel-related topics. Initially, the plan was to rely on guidebooks, newspapers, and magazines for the website's content. However, that model changed quickly as fellow travelers were able to contribute content by conveying their own travel experiences on the TripAdvisor website. As a result, TripAdvisor became a very early adopter of user-generated content as consumer reviews far outpaced professional reviews in a very short time. Now touted as the largest travel site in the world, TripAdvisor claims 60 million members and over 170 million reviews and suggestions about hotels, restaurants, and other travel-related attractions and businesses. Positive reviews and personal recommendations can have a very profound effect on the life of a single service provider at a destination. So TripAdvisor is more than a travel service for tourists. It literally changes the lives of the people providing travel services throughout the world. Many of these people are poor and have no means to communicate their service offerings to the world. Simply by placing a TripAdvisor decal in the window of their modest vans and becoming linked to TripAdvisor, these people become part of something much larger that is recognized by travelers nearly everywhere. Their association with TripAdvisor not only changed their life and also the lives of their families, but it also changed the lives of the people around them. They believe that other than to put a roof over your head and feed your family, why would anyone need more money? Their solution is simple. They spread his good fortune throughout the community by offering them the opportunity to become part of the client experience. In the end, clients and providers alike benefit economically and experientially. Whether TripAdvisor recognizes or not, the company is much more than a travel service. The firm's promotion or communication strategy is one of the key components of the service marketing mix. Communication strategy communicates the firm's positioning strategy to its target markets, including consumers, employees, stockholders, and suppliers for the purpose of achieving organizational objectives. The elements of the communications mix fall into 5 broad categories. Here, the communication mix refers to the array of communication tools available to marketers, including advertising, personal selling, publicity, sales promotion, and sponsorships. Personal selling refers to the two-way element of the communication mix in which the service provider influences a consumer via direct interaction. Advertising is a one-way communication tool that utilizes such media as television and radio to reach a broadly defined audience. Publicity and public relations refers to a one-way communication tool between an organization and its customers, vendors, news media, employees, stockholders, the government, and the general public. Sales promotions refers to a one-way communication tool that utilizes promotional or informational activities at the point of sale. Sponsorships allow the service firm to target a narrow but highly desirable target audience and provide an option for service firms to adapt to consumers' changing media habits. Using more than one communication tool to communicate the same message, known as integrated marketing communications, the IMC concept that we learned in marketing management, or using any one tool repeatedly increases the chances that existing and potential customers will be exposed to the firm's message, associate with the firm, and remember it. By reinforcing its message, the firm can ensure the existing customers as well as potential ones become more aware of who the firm is and what it has to offer. The firm's communication mix often lays the foundation of subsequent contact with potential consumers, making discussions with consumers easier for the provider and more comfortable for the consumers. Therefore, managing service communication mix is much more than developing an advertisement, buying a commercial time slot, and sitting back and watching what happens. Marketing as a discipline consists of a number of processes that, when used effectively, increase the likelihood of success for the process' intended purpose. Similarly, service practitioners who adhere to the service communication processes substantially increase their odds of obtaining their communication objectives. See Figure 7.1, Managing the Service Communication Strategy Step by Step. As shown in this figure, managing the service communication strategy includes several steps: selecting target markets, establishing communication objectives, setting the communication budget, formulating the positioning strategy, establishing message and media strategies, monitoring, evaluating, and controlling the communication strategy. Developing a communication strategy follows a common pattern whether the firm is producing goods or services. The service firm must first analyze the needs of consumers in the marketplace and then categorize consumers with similar needs into market segments. Segments that become the focus of the firm's marketing efforts become target markets. For example, women are more likely to initiate a call to a lawyer when automotive-related injuries occur. Because of this, law advertising pertaining to personal injury as a result of an automobile accident should be targeted primarily to women. The typical respondents to attorney advertising are blue-collar, age 21 to 54, with a 9th to 12th grade education. Younger callers tend to be single-wage earners with families consisting of small children. This target audience is very connected to the television, as they obtain 90% of their current information from these media. The other point is that prospects, users, and employees represent the three broad target audiences for any service communication strategy. Prospects. As marketers of consumer services do not usually know prospects in advance, they typically need to employ a traditional communication mix comprising elements such as media advertising, online advertising, public relations, and the use of purchase lists for direct mail or telemarketing. Users. In contrast to prospects, more cost-effective channels are often available to reach existing users. These may include cross or upselling efforts by frontline employees, point-of-sale promotions, information distributed during service encounters, and location-based mobile apps. If the firm has a membership relationship with its customers and a database containing contact and profiling information, it can distribute highly targeted information through apps, email, messages, direct mail, or telephone. Employees. Employees serve as a secondary audience for communication campaigns through public media. A well-designed campaign targeted at customers can also be motivating for employees. The advertising content shows them what is proposed to customers and thereby helps to shape their behavior and performance. However, there's a risk of generating cynicism among employees and actively demotivating them if the communication in question promotes levels of performance that employees regard as unrealistic or impossible to achieve. The second step is to establish communication objectives. Once the target audience for a service has been clearly identified, the firm needs to specify what exactly it wants to achieve with the audience. At the most general level, marketing communication objectives are to inform, educate, persuade, remind, shape behavior, and build relationships. Objectives can be strategic or tactical. Strategic objectives include building a service brand and positioning it and its service products against the competition. Companies use marketing communications to persuade target customers that their service product offers a better solution for customer needs than the offerings of competing firms. Communication efforts serve not only to attract new users, but also to maintain contact and build relationships with an organization's existing customers. Tactical service communication objectives relate to shaping and managing customers' perceptions, beliefs, attitudes, and behavior during any of the three stages of the service consumption process, as we discussed in service consumer behavior chapter. This figure shows you the services marketing communication funnel. In this figure, you can see how common tactical communications objectives map against the three stages of service consumption. See the left column in this figure. And the related key consumer behavior concepts and theories in the right column. You may be familiar with models that deal with the pre-purchase phase. These are generally referred to as the sales funnel or purchase funnel from the consumer's perspective. There are also models that depict the stages a consumer typically passes through as he or she proceeds from not being aware of a product to actually buying it. Probably the oldest model of this type is AIDA, standing for awareness, interest, desire, and action. It explains how consumers move from cognitive, the awareness, to affective, the interest and desire, and finally to behavioral, the action responses. The AIDA model has stood the test of time and is still used. The hierarchy of effects model is an extension of the AIDA model and is now the most widely used framework to describe this process. It starts with a cognitive stage of awareness and knowledge, followed by an affective stage that leads to liking, preference, and conviction, and finally a behavioral stage of buying. The services marketing communications funnel is aligned to the AIDA and hierarchy of effects model in the pre-purchase stage and extends them by incorporating a wider range of service-specific objectives. Moreover, as neither of the two models covers the service encounter and post-encounter stages, we have added service communication objectives relating to these two stages in this figure. For example, many services are membership type and contractual in nature, and therefore include a host of post-encounter behaviors that can be shaped by communications. The services marketing communications funnel starts with a broad target audience at the top and narrows down to customers who actually buy and consume the service. Even for loyalty initiatives, firms typically do not target all their customers with the same intensity. The focus tends to be on their platinum or premium customers with high purchase volumes. This figure also shows the communication objectives can be highly specific and can address any aspect of service consumer behavior. In this figure, you can also see a few important communication objectives. The first one, promote tangible cues to communicate quality. Even if customers understand what a service is supposed to do, they may find it hard to differentiate the offerings of different suppliers. Companies can use concrete cues to communicate service performance by highlighting the quality of equipment and facilities, and by emphasizing employees' characteristics such as qualifications, experience, commitment, and professionalism. Some performance attributes are easier or more appropriate to communicate than others. Airlines and hospitals do not advertise safety because even the suggestion that things might go wrong makes many people nervous. Instead, they approach this ongoing customer concern indirectly by communicating the high quality of their people, facility, equipment, and processes. The second objective is to add value through communication content. Information and consultation are important ways to add value to product. Prospective customers may need information and advice about what service options are available to them. Firms such as travel agencies need to provide customers with information and advice about what options are available to them, where and when these services are available, how much they cost, and what specific features, functions, and service benefits they have. The third objective is to facilitate customer involvement in service production. When customers are actively involved in service production, they need training to perform well, just as employees do. Marketers often use sales promotions as incentives to encourage customers to make the necessary changes in their behavior. For example, giving price discounts or running lucky draws are some ways to encourage customers to switch to self-service. The fourth objective is to promote the contribution of service personnel and backstage operations. High quality performance, frontline staff, and backstage operations can be important differentiators for services. In high contact services, frontline personnel are central to service delivery. Their presence makes the service more tangible and in many cases more personalized. Advertising, brochures, websites, and videos on YouTube can also show customers the work that goes on backstage to ensure good service delivery. Highlighting the expertise and commitment of employees whom customers normally never encounter may enhance trust in the organization's competence and commitment to service quality. For example, Starbucks has publicity materials and videos that show customers what service personnel do behind the scenes. Starbucks show how coffee beans are cultivated, harvested, produced, and specifically highlights its use of finest and freshest ingredients. Another objective is to stimulate and shift demand to match capacity. Low demand outside peak periods is a serious problem for service industry with a high fixed cost, such as hotels. One strategy is to run promotions that offer extra value, such as room upgrades or free breakfast, to encourage demand without decreasing price. When demand increases, the number of promotions can be reduced or eliminated. Advertising and sales promotions can also help to shift usage from peak to lower demand periods and thereby match demand with available capacity at a given time. The objectives of a firm's communication mix often relate directly to the service offering stage within the product life cycle. In general, the major communication objectives within the introduction and growth stages of the PLC are to inform the customer. Informational communications introduce the service offering and create brand awareness for the firm. Informational communications also encourage trial, and they often prepare the way for personal selling efforts to be conducted later. Communications objectives during the growth and maturity stages of the PLC tend to lean toward informational and persuasive content. Objectives during this stage include creating a positive attitude toward the service offerings compared to competitive alternatives, trying to provoke an immediate purchase action, and enhancing the firm's image. Communications objectives during the maturity and decline stages of the PLC tend to use persuasive and reminder communications. The communications objectives during this phase of the PLC are to influence existing customers to purchase again, to provide ongoing contact with the existing client base in order to remind clients that the firm still values their relationships, and to confirm clients' past purchase decisions, thereby minimizing levels of felt cognitive dissonance. As with informational communications, reminder communications tend to be less obtrusive and more acceptable to professional organizations than persuasive communications. Finally, the broad categories of informational, persuasive, and reminder objectives are typically undertaken to achieve additional strategic objectives, such as increases in sales, positive changes in consumer attitudes, and increases in overall consumer awareness of the firm and its offerings. Moreover, when developing communication objectives, each objective should be stated in SMART terms. Specific objectives should be stated in specific, for example, sales, awareness, as opposed to general terms. For example, let's do a good job this year. Achievable objectives should be realistic and reachable. Unrealistic objectives will never be achieved. They may actually discourage instead of encourage employee behavior. Relevant objectives should be relevant to the people who are undertaking the objectives. Corporate personnel should undertake corporate level objectives, while department personnel should undertake department level objectives. Time bound objectives should be stated to be completed within a specific time frame. Let's say 6 months or 1 year or 3 years. Once the target market is selected and communication objectives established, the communications budget needs to be set. Budget setting techniques typically are covered in most introductory marketing classes. Figure 7.3 provides a brief description of each technique. Ideally, the firm's communication objectives should drive the budget. However, a quick review of most of the budget setting techniques just mentioned reveals that it is often the budget that drives which objectives can be achieved and not the other way around. Most service firms will allocate a greater budget to services marketing communications if they believe that it will increase sales and profits. However, the optimal point of communication expenditure is difficult to predict, and setting the budget is one of the hardest decisions to make. In practice, service firms use a number of methods to determine their communication budget, just as shown in this table, including allocating a percentage of sales or profit, matching competitors' expenditure, using last year's budget, etc., etc. The most logical method, however, is the objective and task method, which is also known as the budget build-up method. This method entails 3 steps. Step 1, defining the communication objectives along the services marketing communication funnel that we just discussed. Step 2, determine the tasks needed to achieve these objectives. Number 3, estimate the cost of the program. The estimated costs become the basis for promotion budget. Of course, a firm's financial position and estimated returns on these investments need to be integrated as well. If costs are too high or expected returns are too low, the budget needs to be scaled back. However, the key challenge is the difficulty in determining the intensity of communications required to achieve a certain goal. The empirical research method can be used in itself or in combination with the objective and task method. The empirical research method runs a series of tests or field experiments with different communications budgets to determine the optimum level of communication spent. How can firms evaluate the success of the communications program once the budget has been spent? If there are specific objectives, the level of success is easy to measure. For example, if specific communication programs are targeted at changing customer behavior, say shifting usage away from peak hours, shifting customers from paper-based statements to e-statements, or upselling to a higher level service. The results are directly measurable. The same applies to direct response marketing, such as email campaigns or online marketing, where click-through, newsletter sign-ups, followers, registrations, lead generation, and sales can be matched directly to specific marketing communications. Similarly, advertising and research agencies have become experts at measuring whether wider communication objectives, for example, awareness, knowledge, and preference, have been achieved. However, the effect of market communications on sales and profits is notoriously hard to measure. A key reason is that marketing communications is only one of the many drivers that determine sales. These drivers may range from service features and service quality to price and competitor activities. The next step in managing the service communication process is to formulate the service firm's positioning strategy. Positioning strategy refers to how the firm is viewed by consumers compared to its competitors. Positioning strategy speaks to the firm's differential advantage. A successful positioning strategy communicates to customers how service firm distinguishes itself from competing alternatives. For example, Starbucks positions itself as a socially responsible organization. Although Starbucks does not deliberately hide its environmental efforts, the company certainly does not openly boast about its numerous efforts as much as it could. Perhaps the less the company openly uses its eco-friendly practices in marketing communication to attract new customers, the more credible its efforts in social responsibility and sustainability become. In addition to its corporate mission statement, Starbucks' commitment to environmentally friendly business practice is demonstrated in a separate environmental mission statement. Starbucks is committed to a role of environmental leadership in all facets of our business. We fulfill this mission by a commitment to understanding of environmental issues and sharing information with our partners, developing innovative and flexible solutions to bring about change, striving to buy, sell, and use environmentally friendly products, recognizing that physical responsibility is essential to our environmental future, instilling environmental responsibility as a corporate value, measuring and monitoring our progress for each project, encouraging all partners to share in our mission. Accordingly, Starbucks actively tries to minimize its environmental impact and creates opportunities for environmentally friendly business in a variety of ways. Other typical examples of positioning strategies used by both goods and service firms include product differentiation, image differentiation, personnel differentiation, and service differentiation, as shown in figure 7.4. In the end, despite a firm's best efforts to communicate its desired positioning, it is the customer who ultimately defines the company's positioning strategy. Upon developing the service firm's positioning strategy, message content must be created that conveys the positioning strategy to current and potential customers. For example, through the effective use of its ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen communication campaign, the Ritz-Carlton has successfully positioned itself as the hotel of choice for both affluent customers and professional service providers. If the objective is to reach non-users of the service, then the choice of communications channel is to reduce to media advertising, selling performed by a sales force rather than a service provider, public relationships, and sponsorships. For example, based on automobile accident statistics, 50 to 60% of all injury-causing accidents occur between Friday morning and Sunday midnight. Two-thirds of all injuries are soft tissue damage that begins to show symptoms 24 to 72 hours after the accident. Therefore, prime time for attorney advertising begins Monday morning and extends through Wednesday afternoon. Current customers can be reached through all the channels discussed here, and they can be further reached by communications through the service providers themselves. Clearly, the role of the service provider is multifaceted. Different providers are called upon to perform different communication functions. These providers and functions have been classified by the following types of service staff. Type 1 service staff are required to deal with customers quickly and effectively in once-only situations where large numbers of customers are present. The exchanges consist of simple information and limited responses to customer requests. Effective communication requires the ability to establish customer relationships very quickly, deal efficiently with customer problems, and convey short, rapid messages that customers can easily understand. Typical examples include frontline personnel at fast food restaurants or dry cleaners, and patient representatives whose job is to obtain and process insurance information. Type 2 service staff deal with numerous, often repeat customers in restricted interactions of somewhat longer duration. The information provided is mixed, partly simple and partly more complex, and requires some independent decision-making on the part of the staff member. Communication in this category requires effective listening skills, the ability to establish trust, interpreting customer information, and making decisions in customer relationships that are often ongoing over a period of time. Communications are generally more intense than in type 1 situations. Typical examples include relationships with suppliers or customer relationships, such as with a customer who requests floral designs from a florist on a regular basis. Type 3 service staff are required to have more complex communication skills. Interactions with consumers are repeated over time. Extensive flow of communication is required, and communication tasks are complicated and often non-repeatable. Effective communication requires the ability to listen and process complicated information, to think creatively in face-to-face interactions with consumers, and to provide information in a clear and understandable manner. Typical examples include staff members who are likely to be qualified as professionals. Any service organization may have employees in one, two, or all three of the preceding categories. Therefore, a bank may have tellers performing type 1 communications, a loan officer engaged in type 2, and a commercial loan officer engaged in type 3. A travel company may have an agent engaged in both type 2 when writing tickets and booking arrangements, and type 3 communications when planning trips, and a receptionist handling type 1 communications. As what we previously discussed in this course, the marketing of service is unique. Therefore, the development of an effective service communication strategy must take into consideration a number of special challenges not typically faced by goods-producing companies. More specifically, intangibility and inseparability present special challenges that should be considered when developing a communication strategy. Segmentation is one of the basic concepts of marketing. In essence, it suggests that a firm's marketing efficiency can be improved by targeting marketing activities at specific groups. First, since services are often consumed as a shared experience with other consumers, mistargeted communications may result in the unanticipated consequence of having two diverse target markets responding to the same communication at the same time. For example, an upscale concept of a restaurant has been developed. But to launch the restaurant, management decides to have a price promotion, and the advertising agency develops inappropriate advertising, or through poor management, the advertising is unfocused. and produces feature articles in the wrong magazines. The result is that the restaurant gets two types of customers: upscale middle-aged couples and price-conscious groups of students. The former were the original target, and the latter were attracted by mistargeted marketing tactics. Second, service managers should also be aware that the firm's communications are often interpreted as explicit service promises on which consumers base their initial expectations. Therefore, service firms should be ready to deliver what is communicated in their promotional messages. They must often walk a thin line between making process that differentiates themselves from competitors, while at the same time not creating unrealistic customer expectations that lead to customer dissatisfaction. For example, expectations can be set by something as explicit as a promise, your food will be ready in 5 minutes, or as implicit as a behavior pattern that sets a tone, a cordial greeting upon entering the place of business. Often such expectations are created unwittingly, as when a server promises to be right back. Such a statement can be viewed both as a binding contract by a customer and a farewell salutation by the service provider. In addition, perception also has many sources. Technical service quality is an objective level of performance produced by operating system of the firm. It is measurable with a stopwatch, temperature gauge, or other measuring instrument. Unfortunately, this is not the level of performance the customer perceives. Perception acts as a filter that moves the perceived service level up or down. Perception itself is influenced by the same factors that dictate expectations. For example, communications can create warm feelings toward the organization that raises perceived service levels. In comparison, inappropriately dressed and ill-behaving staff can deliver high levels of technical service quality but be poorly perceived by the consumer, who will downgrade the perceived service level. The staff of service firms often form a secondary audience for any firm's advertising campaign. This is what we previously discussed in chapter 7, this lecture, right? In order for service firms to succeed, they must first sell the service job to the employees before they sell the service to the customer. Communications that are targeted to customers can also convey company goals and performance expectations to employees. For years, communications from Southwest Airlines have shown smiling employees going to great lengths to please the customer. Although the communications are clearly targeted toward customers, they also send a message to employees about appropriate role behavior. In the end, service communications not only provide a means of communicating with customer, but they also serves as a vehicle to communicate, motivate, and educate employees. This is called internal marketing. Another consideration unique to service sector is that people who sell the service are often the same people who provide the service. In many cases, the service provider is much more comfortable providing the service than marketing his or her own ability. However, in some cases, providers become so involved in the communication aspects of their firm that they no longer actively participate in the operations. The conflicts associated with selling versus operations are at least twofold. First, economic considerations. These individuals are typically paid for performing the service but not paid for selling activities. Second, Role-related. Many service providers feel uncomfortable with their communication role. They believe that communications activities such as personal selling are not within their areas of expertise, and in some cases, beneath them. Based on all what we previously discussed, the special considerations, specific guidelines for developing service communications include the following. Number one, develop a word-of-mouth communication network. Given the importance of non-personal sources, communications should be developed that facilitate the development of a word-of-mouth network. Number two, promise what is possible. Number three, tangibilize the intangible. Because services are performances rather than objects, their benefits can be difficult to communicate to customers. This is especially the case when the service in question does not involve tangible actions performed on customers of their possessions. Intangibility creates four problems for marketers seeking to promote its attributes or benefits. These four problems include abstractness, generality, non-searchability, and mental impalpability. Abstractness concepts such as financial security or investment-related matters, expert advice, or safe transportation do not have one-to-one correspondence with physical objects. It can therefore be challenging for marketers to connect their services to these intangible concepts. Generality refers to items that comprise a class of objects, persons, or events, for instance, airline seats, flight attendants, and cabin service, as there may be physical objects that can show these services. Abstractness is not a problem. However, such services are not specific enough. Therefore, even though most consumers know what these services are, it is difficult for marketers to create a unique value proposition to communicate what makes a specific offering distinctly different from and superior to competing offerings. Non-searchability. This refers to the fact that many service attributes cannot be searched or inspected before they are purchased. Physical service attributes such as the appearance of a health club and the type of equipment installed can be checked in advance, but the experience of working with the trainers can only be determined through extended personal involvement. Mental impalpability. Many services are complex, multidimensional, or novel. This market is difficult for consumers, especially new prospects, to understand what the experience of using them will be like and what benefits will result from the experience. So, how should service messages be communicated? The intangibility of service presents problems for advertising that need to be overcome. For example, in order to overcome the problem caused by abstractness, advertising strategy might include capturing and showing typical customers benefiting from the service, right? In order to overcome the problem from generality, advertising strategies might include documenting facts and statistics about the service delivery system, or documenting and citing past service performance statistics, such as the number of packages that have been delivered on time, or presenting actual service delivery being performed by service personnel. The video mode is best for showing this. In order to overcome the problem caused from non-searchability, Advertising strategy might include obtaining and presenting testimonials from customers who have experienced the service. If the service is high in credence attributes, documenting the awards received, all the qualifications of the service provider is a good idea. In terms of overcoming the problem from mental improbability, advertising strategy might include presenting a clear step-by-step documentation of what exactly will happen during the service experience, or presenting an actual case history of what the firm did for a specific client and how it solved the client problem, or presenting a story or depiction of a customer's experience with a service. In addition to these strategies, firms can also use tangible cues and metaphors to overcome the four challenges of intangibility. Both these two methods help to communicate intangible service attributes and benefits to potential customers. Tangible cues. Commonly used strategies in advertising include the use of tangible cues whenever possible, especially for services that involve few tangible elements. It's also helpful to include vivid information that catches the audience attention and produces a strong, clear impression on the senses, especially for services that are complex and highly intangible. For example, many business schools feature successful alumni to make the benefits of their education tangible and communicate what their programs could do for prospective students in terms of career advancement, salary increases, and lifestyle. Use metaphors. Some companies have created metaphors that are tangible in nature to help communicate the benefits of their service offerings and to emphasize key points of differentiation. The Merrill Lynch bowl has been a symbol for the wealth manager's business philosophy, which suggests both a bullish market and a strong commitment to the financial performance of its client. Where possible, advertising metaphors should highlight how service benefits are actually provided. Consulting firm E.T. Kearney emphasizes that it includes all management levels in seeking solutions, not just higher level management. One of its advertisements showed bear traps across the office floor, drawing attention to the way in which the company differentiates its service through careful work with all levels in its client organizations, thus avoiding the problems left behind by other consulting firms who work mostly with senior management. Intangibilizing the intangible, the scale of market entities presented in Chapter 1 should be turned on its end. See Figure 7.5. Tangible dominant market entities described as concrete by nature, such as perfume, use image development in their advertising schemes. From a basic viewpoint, perfume is simply liquid scent in a bottle. The customer can pick it up, try it on, and smell the perfume's fragrance. Hence, the perfume is tangible dominant. As with many tangible dominant products, the advertising tends to make it more abstract in order to differentiate one product from another. In contrast, the advertising of intangible dominant products, described as abstract by nature, should concentrate on making them more concrete through the use of physical cues and tangible evidence. For example, McDonald's promotes food, folks, and fun in its advertisement. Food and folks are concrete, and fun is abstract. this is a good example to establish the communication strategy for which the objective is set up for promoting products in the middle of the scale of market entities. So the company often use both approaches, abstract and concrete elements. Other specific guidelines for developing service communications include fostering working relationship between customer and provider, reducing consumer fears about variations in performance, determining and focusing on relevant service quality dimensions, differentiating the service product via service delivery process, and making the service more easily understood. After reading this part, please give one example or multiple examples to demonstrate at least two above-mentioned points in this slide. The 10 most frequent problems encountered by professional service providers include third-party accountability, investors, insurance companies, banks, governmental agencies, and even members of their own professions often hold professional service providers accountable for their actions or at least monitor those actions. Creating credibility and projecting the image of a quality firm to third parties can be accomplished through the firm's communication mix. The second problem is client uncertainty. Many professional services are costly, associated with danger or importance, and in some cases, technical and specialized, making them difficult for the customer or client to understand. So, effective communication can communicate the procedures involved, show the likely outcomes, answer consumers' common questions, and or minimize consumers' areas of concern. The third problem is experience is essential. Communications must be effective in attracting and maintaining the customer base. Fourth, the limited differentiability. As the level of competition increases among professional service providers, differentiating among providers decreases as they match one another's offerings with comparable alternatives. So, marketing communications that differentiate the provider on factors beyond the mere service product itself, such as personnel, customer service, and image, must be communicated to the marketplace to set the providers apart from the crowd. The fifth problem is to maintain quality control. The customer plays a major role in the quality of the final outcome. So communication that stresses the importance of the following professionals' advice and its relationship to achieving positive outcomes educates the customer. The sixth one, turning doers into sellers. In many cases, the employment of outside sales representatives to market professional services to clientele is inappropriate and ineffective. Client uncertainty dictates that the professional provider, him or herself, must become actively involved in the sales process to reassure clients and minimize their fears. Ultimately, no one should be able to sell the available service better than the provider. However, as discussed earlier, while some providers thrive on making sales, many other providers feel uncomfortable when thrust into the sales spotlight. The seventh problem is the challenge of dividing the professional's time between marketing and providing services. Directly related to the previous point is the problem associated with the professional provider becoming too involved in the personal selling component of the firm's communication mix. Therefore, the professional must decide how much personal time to allocate to marketing activities and how to divide the time between cultivating new prospects, maintaining relationships with existing clients, and involvement in more general public relations work. This is not an easy task. The eighth problem is the tendency to be reactive rather than proactive. The pressure of everyday business cuts into the amount of time the professional can devote to marketing activities. The communication mix should not be based solely on the professional's personal selling efforts. Ongoing communications must work for the provider in a proactive manner while the provider performs everyday activities with existing clients. Another problem is that the effects of advertising are unknown. Some members of professional societies still frown upon the use of certain communication methods, such as traditional marketing. Many professionals are still struggling with pros and cons associated with advertising. The last problem mentioned in the textbook is that professional providers have a limited marketing knowledge base. Many of the terms you take for granted as business students, such as market segments, target market, marketing mix variables and differentiation, and positioning strategies, are totally foreign to many professional service providers. Due to the limited marketing knowledge base, professional service providers are often tempted to develop the firm's communication mix in isolation without regard to the firm's overall marketing strategy. Ultimately, the firm's communication mix should be consistent with targeted consumer expectations and synergistic with other elements in the marketing mix. Okay, for this part, I want you to give one or multiple examples to demonstrate at least 3 above-mentioned points. Because of the halo effect, which means that an overall favorable or unfavorable impression based on early stages of the service encounter, early stages of the service encounter often set the tone for the consumer evaluations made throughout the service experience. Therefore, providers must pay special attention to the initial interactions in the encounter because they are often the most important. This is the first special considerations for professional service providers. The firm's printed image includes all printed communication to clients, such as correspondence, annual reports, newsletters, and billings. It also includes printed material of general use, such as firm brochures, letterhead, envelopes, and business cards, as well as internal communications, from agendas to checklists, from memos to manuals. Printed materials create a visual pathway through which the professional image of the firm can be consistently transmitted. Other special considerations include establishing regular communications with clients, developing a firm brochure, and informed office staff is vital. To summarize, communication strategy is one of the key components of a firm's overall marketing mix. Its role is to inform, persuade, and/or remind consumers about the services being offered. The objectives of a firm's communication mix often relate directly to the service offering stage within the product lifecycle. A variety of special considerations that pertain to services must be addressed when developing the communication mix. All right. Before we close this chapter, please do not forget the class exercises that I previously mentioned in this lecture video. And also there are after class video exercise for you to complete. Bye for now. See you in next chapter.